You're about to hear one of the most incredible stories in the entire history of science. Seriously, it's a story about a brilliant mind pushed right to the very edge, forced to make a choice that would change not just his own life, but how we literally see the world.
Just imagine standing in front of the most powerful ruler of your time and hearing those words. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? But for a scientist named Ibn al-Haytham, this was a very, very real ultimatum. So, how on earth did a renowned scientist get himself into a situation like this? Well, the answer starts with a single, really overconfident promise that just spiraled completely out of his control.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the 11th century, and our main character is Ibn al-Haytham. He's a famous scholar from Basra, and this guy was a true polymath, a master of physics, mathematics, astronomy, you name it. His reputation was so huge, it eventually reached the ruler of Egypt.
Now this was an incredibly bold claim. He was so confident in his knowledge of math and engineering that he boasted he could build a dam and finally regulate the mighty Nile River. This brag gets back to the Caliph al-Hakim, who was, let's just say, unpredictable and very feared. And what does he do? He immediately summons Ibn al-Haytham to Cairo to make it happen.
So Ibn al-Haytham travels to Egypt, probably thinking he's about to make history. But then he gets there, he stands before the raw power of the river, and the scale of the challenge just hits him like a ton of bricks. He sees the ruins of ancient marvels, and it clicks. If they couldn't tame the Nile, how could he? The whole project was impossible. And with a guy like Caliph al-Hakim, failure wasn't an option. Failure meant death.
Going back to the Caliph and saying, hey, sorry, can't do it, that was basically a death sentence. He was trapped. So Ibn al-Haytham had to think, and he had to think fast. He needed a way out, a plan so completely nuts, so unexpected, that it just might save his life. So what do? His options were pretty grim. He could admit he failed and be executed. Or he could try something completely radical. He chose to pretend he was insane. It was this extraordinary gamble, banking on the fact that Islamic law at the time protected those who were mentally unfit. He chose survival, and just like that, he was declared a madman and put under house arrest. For 10 long years, a full decade, the world believed one of its greatest minds was completely broken. He was locked away, all his property taken. But this wasn't the end of his story. In fact, this was the beginning of everything important.
So what does a certified genius do when he's locked in a room for 10 years? He doesn't just waste away. He gets to work. He turns his prison into a laboratory. Behind those closed doors, Ibn al-Haytham started a quiet revolution. And it all began by just observing a simple beam of light.
While he was stuck in his room, he noticed this really simple phenomenon. A little bit of light was shining through a tiny hole into the darkness. And what he saw on the opposite wall was amazing. A perfect but upside-down image of the world outside. This was the camera obscura, which is Latin for dark chamber. It's the principle that would, centuries later, lead to the invention of the camera.
And the idea behind it is actually beautiful in its simplicity. Light travels in straight lines. So when all those rays of light from the outside world pass through one tiny little opening, they cross over, and that's what projects the inverted image. It was this simple observation that led Ibn al-Haytham to question everything. I mean everything we thought we knew about how we see.
You have to understand, for over 1,000 years, since the ancient Greeks like Euclid and Ptolemy, everybody believed that our eyes worked by shooting out invisible rays like lasers to see the world. But Ibn al-Haytham's little dark room experiment proved the exact opposite was true. We don't send light out, we see because light comes into our eyes. This was a monumental, world-changing shift in understanding our most fundamental sense. But here's the thing. The what he discovered is amazing, right? But the how, that's his real genius. His true legacy wasn't just about optics. It was about creating a completely new way to discover the truth about anything.
He summed up his philosophy perfectly. He argued that a true scientist must become the enemy of all that he reads. How cool is that? Instead of just blindly trusting the old authorities like Aristotle, he believed you had to doubt everything, question everything, and test every single claim for yourself.
Does this process look a little familiar? It absolutely should, because what you're looking at is the scientific method. Centuries before it became the gold standard in Europe, Ibn al-Haytham was systematically observing, creating a hypothesis, testing it with careful experiments, and only then drawing a conclusion based on actual evidence. And the result of all this work was his 7-volume masterpiece, The Book of Optics, which he wrote entirely during his confinement. It's filled with some of the earliest and most detailed diagrams of the human eye and the optic nerve. He didn't just sit and think. He dissected, he diagrammed, he tested. This was his method in action.
Then in 1021, the Caliph al-Hakim died. And just like that, the act was up. Ibn al-Haytham was freed. He walked out of that room not as a failed engineer or a madman, but as one of the greatest scientific minds in history, soon to be known to the world as the father of modern optics.
And his influence, well, it was immense. His Book of Optics was translated into Latin, and for centuries it was the go-to text for European thinkers. We're talking about scientific giants like Roger Bacon, the astronomer Johannes Kepler, and even the great Leonardo da Vinci. They all built their own work on the ideas he first laid out in that dark.
The timescale of his legacy is just staggering. His ideas echoed through the centuries. In fact, some of the mathematical puzzles he came up with were so complex that one of them, known as Alhazen's problem, wasn't actually solved until 1997, almost 1,000 years after he first wrote it down.
And get this, his impact is literally out of this world. To honor his incredible contributions to optics and astronomy, there is a crater on the moon named Alhazen, the Latin version of his name, forever etching his legacy into the very sky he studied so closely.
So, think about it. From an act of feigned madness, born out of pure desperation, Ibn al-Haytham gave us the scientific method and a whole new understanding of our most important sense. He basically taught us how to see. It really makes you wonder, in our own time, with all the information we have, what crucial truths are we still failing to see clearly?